person that we've got up is Nick Maclean of Burnett-Mary, NRM in Queensland. So in addition to being involved in supporting landholders to participate in the program, Nick's been in charge of the program working group and wrangling cats, which involves the regional NRM organisations, the Department of Environment, the Clean Energy Regulator and the ANUs. So that group's been meeting weekly and or fortnightly, depending on the urgency throughout the year. So Nick's had a key coordinating role as well as working in his own region. So I'll hand over to you, Nick, just to give us a bit of an overview, and then straight after Nick, we're going to have Susan Stovell, because I think you guys are sharing your PowerPoint slides, aren't you? So if people could continue to put your questions into the chat, but at the end of the session, we will also have an opportunity for people to ask questions directly if you prefer to do that. So feel free to put them in the chat or hold on to them and stick your hand up when we're done. So I'll just go to Nick. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks everyone for having me along today. Yeah, and I mean, I suppose the reason I'm here is probably really to talk about how we formed the working group and the benefits we really experienced, I think, program wide from doing so. So I did prepare a few slides, which I will put up now. And everyone can see that all right, I'm assuming. Yep, all right, thank you. So yeah, I thought I'd start with the good old NRM region brag board. Not to say that all of these different logos you see here obviously aren't necessarily involved in this particular program, but it's a great way to exemplify, I think, what NRM regions have brought to the delivery of the pilots in particular. So I mean, as you can see there's a whole plethora of people, groups and organisations that we work with in the delivery of all NRM programs. And certainly that collaboration and that partnership, you know, is certainly in the DNA, I would say, of all regional NRM groups across Australia. And I suppose this is just who we're currently working with at BMRG, but there probably are more, but there's definitely two key partners, I would say, without being too esoteric about it, that we don't have up here. One is certainly our landholders. You know, we can't make any of this possible 9 times out of 10 without the important relationships we have with the people we represent regionally. And this is the esoterical bit here. And the other partner we have is the landscapes that we manage as well. So if we didn't have the people and we didn't have those natural systems and assets we've been talking about, none of this could come together. And I guess in terms, to bring it back home to the carbon plus biodiversity pilot, in terms of what we really thought we could bring was probably that collaboration potential, and to really try to harness that to help, you know, put this program together to inject a bit of intel into it, and I suppose to sort of share those lessons learned in one central platform to take this forward. So just to talk about that formation of the National Working Group a bit more, I mean, we had the Carbon plus Biodiversity round 1 pilot was announced back in, I think it was April or March this year, which seems like several lifetimes ago now, but that's all right. And here's a photo of Professor McIntosh with David Littleproud at a farm in Armamore in our region to announce that particular pilot. So as soon as we knew this bit of work was on, we really thought that we should probably pull ourselves together for those exact reasons I just mentioned in the previous slides. You know, and even the fact that Susan and I are sharing slides is probably a bit of a testament to the partnerships we're capable of. So we really had a quick inception meeting with ANU and the department, and this is where we landed, was basically to try to work together to help get this thing off the ground, I suppose. That's a bit of a map of the round 1 region. So, you know, obviously the Burnett-Mary in Queensland, Central West in New South Wales, as Andrew mentioned before, North Central Victoria, North in Eyre Peninsula in South Australia, and Southwest over in Western Australia. So as you can see, we're in pretty far-flung different places across the nation anyway. And really what we realised in the early instance of this was the need to try to share as much information as possible from the get-go. As you'll all be very well aware that there's a lot of transactional costs can come, and time, not just money, although time is money, in terms of the one-to-one discussions that departments typically have with each NRM region. So usually 9 times out of 10, this sort of thing will happen on a one-on-one basis with NRM regions. And then usually what you'll find, if there's a like cause, like we're in a Great Barrier Reef catchment in Queensland, that 9 times out of 10, the regional bodies working on like programs will pull some sort of platform together down the track. So we kind of flipped that on its head a little bit and decided to form that up front. So BMRG was really keen to be a part of that. We've got our own sort of strategic direction we're trying to take in the area of natural capital investment. And this is a great pilot program that kind of reflects those intentions. So we're only too happy to sort of put our hand up to lead that and to administer that. And it's worked very, very well. So apart from that sort of platform and for information sharing that we've provided, it's also been really critical in speeding up the process of having input into those protocols that Andrew and Don spoke about earlier. So that's where we've got kind of basically a national set of guidelines, if you will, or protocols that we're able to have some input to from each of those 6 regions, which really help to make that as bespoke as possible for the landholders and the landscapes and the state systems that we work within, which is really important. And we found we got that right in most of those cases. Some of the difficulties around that, as already mentioned by Andrew, was in some of the pricing protocols, for example. There's a lot of service providers out there in our region, but not all of them could answer the questions we had in time, just as one example, whereas other regions may have had less service providers. But all in all, it worked extremely well, particularly the planning protocols, which we obviously had input into and were able to help the landholders with. Beyond the actual project documentation, like the protocols and the guidelines themselves as well, was really gave the ANU and the department who were working with Cogent as an application developer for us to be able to test some of these online platforms and have some input into that or give feedback to it before it goes live. So that was really a critical part we were able to play as well. And we were able to get a number of things sort of tweaked in that system, and hats off to the department and ANU and Cogent for being able to respond to that advice very rapidly in the early parts of that session. So the other one too, I guess, and I mean, this is really comes down to what regional bodies do generally provide to state and federal government policy and the funding opportunities that come with it is we kind of do act as a conduit in both ways, whether it's about trying to put guidelines or policy speak into more plain English, but also being very capable of listening to our wonderful landholders to, identifying where there's common messages in that feedback, and to be able to provide that back to the department in a very efficient manner was the other thing that this platform's been able to do. And I think the other big one in natural resource management in the sector, generally speaking, is really this idea of continuous improvement. So we're all familiar with monitoring, evaluation, reporting and improvement frameworks, for example. And in my experience over the last 16 years of being in the sector, I do feel like it's kind of the I that gets missed out in that Mary framework. It's the improvement piece. So we've really tried to utilise this group as best we can to help really hone in on that improvement side of the sort of the continuous feedback loop in that process. And obviously, when you're looking at a trial or a pilot such as these, that's such a critical part of it in terms of harnessing the learnings and putting them into some sort of form of recommendation or practice the next time it's gone around. So the way that we really did that was we decided as NRM regions, with the support of ANU and the department, was following that carbon plus biodiversity pilot in a couple of phases too. So we sort of had 2 distinct phases, in my opinion. We had the the launch and the application phase, and then we sort of had what I would consider the post-offer phase. So once successful landholders had received offers, we really thought they were two critical times that we should pull ourselves together as a collective of regions initially, but also with ANU and the department to really try to capture that down into capture those consistent and common themes down into a body of knowledge, I suppose, in the form of a report. And it was interesting to see, I guess, how many common elements came out across those 6 different regions, and some of the consistent themes where there might have been different takes from different regions, but basically the same underlying tone was there. And that could have been around the use of the application portal, which is one of the best application systems I've ever seen. Or it could have been maybe about, the way that I don't know, a fact sheet or something was written and how that was interpreted by a landholder. And I suppose the other thing around the considerations and feedback side of it was really trying to lay out some recommendations should carbon plus biodiversity in this instance, become a fully fledged program. We're trying to give a bunch of juicy tidbits to go off, I suppose, in terms of trying to get that right should it go a little bit further. And once again, that's been an extremely responsive process. So not only for round 1 of carbon plus biodiversity, but we've mimicked a similar process for the enhancing remnant vegetation pilot under the agricultural stewardship package as well. And from where I sit at least, and I'm sure the other regions involved in carbon plus biodiversity, round 1 would agree, that it was heartening to see so much of that feedback incorporated not only into the enhancing remnant vegetation pilot, which uses similar processes, but also into round 2 of carbon plus biodiversity pilot as well. And we treat this as a living document, so by no means do we sort of write one report and that's it. We're up to our 3rd version of that report now, and it basically just grows off itself. I suppose the important part of that is that there's a body of knowledge. It's not just hearsay in a meeting or in discussions one-on-one with a landholder or who a landholder might be represented by. It's there for everyone to see, and it's a shared document. So we're coming up to sort of like a version 3.1 of that, I suppose, which we're really asking for feedback from the department and ANU on how the NRM regions have performed in that space too. Because not to say that it's been one-sided necessarily, but it just seems like an opportune moment to do that, and certainly happy to share any of this information with the other regions involved or beyond. And I think the other thing that came out of that feedback and considerations report was that there was a lot of common goals that NRM regions had with this particular agricultural stewardship package. So I know one for us, I know a comment or a question was raised before around this idea of landscape resilience. And I know for me, as someone who's basically lived their entire career in the natural systems side of things when it comes to NRM, I've really had some paradigm shifts over the last few years where I used to be all about, not all about national parks, but that was a big focus, was this sort of conservation estate and what it can achieve from a biodiversity outcomes perspective. And then you sort of really got to take a step back and look at Australia as a whole and say, well, 57% of Australia's land mass is agricultural. So whatever you can do to improve biodiversity in those areas is obviously a huge advantage to the whole cause, but also to achieving something that resembles more at a landscape scale, which is super important, as we know, for a whole range of reasons. The other one too, as I suppose, is just supporting farmers, generally speaking, in environmental stewardship, but particularly with these market-based drivers and those other elements, I suppose, that have been built into the design of carbon plus biodiversity that Andrew spoke of earlier. It's really about trying to not only just fund outcomes, I suppose, but how do you embed that into things like diversified income for landholders that they've got control of, but also a really healthy dose of recognising the environmental stewardship that they do provide and coming up with more creative and, I suppose, diverse ways of supporting that role that they play. And then the other obvious one was definitely about, in our region, which has been drought affected for about 6 years in a row, It was definitely about an opportunity for farmers to diversify their income and also to enhance resilience on their farm at a property scale as well, were two big drivers from our region. So I think that's all I had to say about it, Rachel, so I probably need to hand over to Sue. But I'd certainly welcome any questions on any of that or any discussion points. Be most welcome.
Right. Thanks so much, Nick. That was a great overview of both the role that we've that regional NRMs have played in the program, and also some insights into, I suppose, into the value that regional NRMs have brought. So yeah, thanks very much for that. So now, thanks, Susan. We've got you next. I think your slides just carry on after this. But so Susan from Peninsula, and like Nick was involved in supporting farmers to participate in the pilot. Although I think it was a bit of a newer experience for you, Susan, in terms of the carbon farming experience. So looking forward to hearing your account. Thanks.
No worries. So just following on from Nick, my part of the presentation, I'm just going to dig that a little bit deeper and talk about what our role was in the program. And when I say our, I mean all six regions collectively, but what we actually brought to the table in that mix and what were the benefits to us as NRM organisations in being involved in this process. So I suppose just to start off, and a lot of this has already been said by some of our other speakers today, but I suppose at the end of the day, we were brought on board to support ANU in the delivery of the DOOR program. And our role was really around being the on-ground implementation. So we're right here in the field and we can actually provide all that on-ground connection to the landholders in the region. I thought, and one of the real standout things from this whole program was that we were able to actually co-design the program with ANU and DOOR so that it actually met each of the requirements of our own particular region. And we are there's a lot of commonalities between us, but we are 6 different regions. So we could tweak those guidelines. We went out and we pulled together all the pricing information and things like that so that it really met the needs of our region in that mix, as well as being a national program. And that was quite unique because often that doesn't happen with national programs. You're sort of stuck within the parameters that are set, whereas we could adjust them. I think as the project rolled on, not only were we involved in that design, but we were then, as the program went live, we were on the ground and actually able to participate in the promotion. So there was a whole range of promotion that came out at the national level, but then we were able, and we had the freedom to tailor that to actually get messages out to our own communities and our own landholders. So most regions used a combination of social media and, we showcased champions, we did all sorts of things, produced fact sheets and all the rest to get that message out there to the audiences. Once the applications were open, we were there on the ground to actually field inquiries. So whilst there was a hotline number that people could ring direct, they also knew that they could talk to a local officer in their region. And that was just answering those general questions that they might have around the guidelines, parameters of the project, but also helping them to, talk about their particular scenario, what they might want to do on their property and help with mapping and things like that. Our staff were also able to help them to actually cost out some of their projects because it was all new to the farmers. So it was about providing whatever support each individual farmer needed to help them progress through to the application phase. And then, as alluded to, the online system was amazing and it was so intuitive that landholders could virtually just walk through, but some of them did need some more sort of tailored help, especially those that weren't quite so IT illiterate. And just some general troubleshooting and things like that. Once the applications closed, from that point on, probably over the last few months, we've played quite an important role in just keeping those communications open with the landholders, helping them through the various stages of contract negotiations, and at the moment through the ERF application process and things like that. So again, just providing, I mean, there's experts that we link them up to with ANU and DOR, but we're just providing that local support to them wherever they need it. And moving forward, we'll probably still play a bit of a role around, I mean, once these projects are through the ERF process and they move into the implementation stage, and there'll be some monitoring and things like that the landholders will need to set up. And I think we'll probably play a key role in continuing to support those landholders for a set of time. So I think the role was great, and you know, it's stuff that we do as NRM organisations across Australia every day anyway. So it's really just linking up a program and trying to make whatever opportunities we can for our landholders to get involved in it. What do we bring to the table in regard to that? And Nick, if you just want to, thanks. I suppose the first thing it's probably important to highlight, we had regions that were very experienced in carbon farming, and then you had other regions that had very little knowledge of carbon farming. And Nick's come more on the more experienced level, whereas for EP, this was our first real foot in the door of a carbon farming program. So not only was it a learning curve for us, but it was a learning curve for our farming community as well. So that was probably a good thing. And I think all across the 6 pilots, there's a similar varying degree of experience and knowledge. We brought was knowledge of what was happening in our state and in our region in the past, and what things had been trialled and hadn't worked, and things like that we could provide into the mix. We also had a good understanding of our region and our landscape and the farming systems within our region. We knew which landholders we could target and that they would probably jump on board with this sort of thing, and others that might not be quite so eager to get on board. And we knew how to sell the program to the landholders, which was probably quite important. And I suppose, I mean, at the coalface, we actually knew we could just get on the phone and ring landholders that we knew had been waiting for something like this to come up out of the woodwork. And I suppose the key thing as well, we weren't someone sitting over in Canberra or whatever, but people already had a trusted relationship with their natural resource management officers and our staff, so they felt more comfortable, I suppose, in just coming to us and asking for advice or support or what have you. And I suppose at the end of the day, we just had that can-do attitude that this is, you know, it's a great program, it's a great opportunity for us to be involved in a pilot program. So we were keen to work proactively and try and make this a success for our region. So what are the benefits from NRM organisations actually being involved in this? And there are quite a few when I sat down thinking about this. I think that first one I touched on a minute ago was just, you know, just improving our own awareness of carbon farming and all the various complex areas of carbon farming and navigating through the whole emissions reduction programs and things like that. So really there was the capacity building for our staff at each different step of the way. I mean, ANU, Andrew and Don were just excellent in providing, you know, online walkthroughs for our staff. So they walked them through how to do every part of the process so that they knew exactly what they needed to be conveying to landholders and what have you. At the end of the day, it's tweaked landholder interest now. I think some of them have dipped their toe in the water, and not all of our projects will end up going through to fruition, but some of them will. So they'll provide us with some really good champions and case studies that can then be used to promote these sorts of programs again going forward. Just having expert advice, being able to just pick up the phone and ring Don or ring Andrew when you've got some sort of question that you just can't answer with a landholder has just been amazing. And they're on the phone. They never miss a beat and they're ready to answer. And I suppose too, one of the big strengths out of this is just that relationship I mean, Nick alluded to the fact that we have a national working group, and that has just been so powerful, being able to catch up. At times through the heat of the program, we were catching up on a weekly basis, other times it was fortnightly, but just being able to debrief after every single part of the process, share what we were all doing and learn from each other as we were going through this has just been amazing. And I know I've had some conversations already with my Northern and York colleagues, the other pilot that'll be here in EP in the next round of this program, trying to just share some of those experiences as well. And I think, you know, the pilots so far, I mean, it'll be a while before the full results are out there, but the fact that we are moving on to a second phase is a good indicator that everyone's happy at this stage with how things are progressing. And I think most important for me, it's given us the confidence as a region. We're already scoping another project with some of our partners, another biodiverse sort of based carbon program that we'll be putting up probably in the new year. So it's sort of given us that confidence to actually try something new and look at some of the other carbon programs out there and what have you. But I think that's everything I was going to cover. So I'll hand back over to Rachel and we'll do any questions.